The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. There's still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
Aloha everyone, I am geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dane DuPont of HawaiiTracker.com, bringing you guys another Kīlauea volcano update today, Monday, October 4th, 2021. Hopefully you guys can see me moving around now. I'm not a statue frozen, and pardon us for our technical issues on our first start there earlier. So today has been a day of technical issues. Let us know if you have any issues with our audio or video or anything else going on. Let Dane know. He'll be monitoring the chats for that. He'll be collecting some questions. We're going to go through like a whole visual tour of Kilauea with a little bit of signals thrown in there. And then we'll do a round of questions at the end there. So Dane will answer whatever questions he can in the chat, or give whatever resources he can. And then we will do some discussion at the end of what is on you guys' mind. So let me get this video playing again. If you guys are just joining us for the first time and missed the first attempt at this, this is a video I took this morning from just northeast of the former Jagger Museum, Uekahuna Bluff. And this is zoomed way in, but it shows what you can see in the daytime there. That lava bubbling. And now what I've done is I've sped it up by 20 times so you can see a little bit more of the motion. And you can see that some of that bubbling disappears as a convection of the lake carries other plates across it there. So that's the video there, and let's see if I can get my annotation tool going here. And yep, here it is. so that I can, there we go, we'll zoom out and show you guys a context of it. So this is what it actually looks like, and shows you how big a zoom lens I'm using. The lava is really within that little gap there at the bottom. So this is a view just from the daytime today. The lava is still, I mean, it's getting more and more visible. I can show you guys when we zoom back out again that this is an area we can identify from some of the aerial photographs and aerial imagery, in part because you can see this cliff over here, right? Right over there. This, whoop, I have an arrowhead that I didn't believe I had there, so I'll try that again. This, whoa, no. Here we go. This cliff right over here. It's one of those technical issues today, right? This is something we can discern along with this dark rock slide and these light rock slides over here on the side as some of the background context of this imagery. And we're looking down this little chute here in a foreground that allows us this little sliver of lava lake. It's just a very small portion of that giant surface. And when I zoom out here, you can see it all fits right in there, right where that yellow line is, just like that. And you can see the fume from all those western vents and the fountaining farther over, and those are not visible directly from that north side. But even with the lava lake just moving, you can see some of this bubbling effect here. So I thought we would structure our visual tour today, you know, going from what can be seen from the public overlook right here, and then working our way across and looking at the features of the lava lake using all the imagery, maybe not all of it, but you know, the highlights of the imagery that's provided by the USGS, and of course we'll rely on their text updates as well. So let me just check something here. Looking for a, all right, so I think something happened to my post on hawaiitracker.com, Dane, but it's all right. What I wanted to share with you guys is this whole idea of the lava lake being bulging, right? The lava lake being higher at the edges where the vents are, and right now that's on a southern and on a western side. So maybe after, what I'll do here is just after showing you guys that cliff right in there, and there's that cliff right there, you can kind of see where that falls. And some of that southern side, the high cliff is right over here, and we're still on the edge of that bench right over there. So that's what I'll use to guide our exploration here going forward. And so I want to see, I could not get this to load earlier. Let's give this a reload and see if I can get this USGS video to load. There it is. Not everything will be quite as fresh right here with this live format, but this is a video released by the USGS from the overflight on October 1st, right? But I wanted to bring this back so we can note, right? So first of all, there is that bubbling southern vent there, and then one against the edge of the cliff. The western vent's over here. Our main island is over here, right? Now looking around here, this is that cliff that we're looking at the bottom of it, and here is those rock slides right in here. So really, when we're looking from the public overlook, we're looking at that corner of the lava lake down in there, right? Kind of this north being that way. That would be the southeast sector, more or less, that you're seeing, right? So you're not really seeing any of this main fountain event over to the side. You're seeing more of the area over here where there's starting to be a perched levee build up. This is a few days old video, so this is still at its early stages. You can't quite see it as distinctly now. But we'll see as the progression of images comes across their screens here that that's growing and developing into a new feature there. So that's the video. And I will move on to show you guys here. What I want to do is present a couple of versions of time-lapse that we're collecting from the F1 camera, thermal camera from the USGS HVO. Bob Martin's got a big part in scraping images, as is Dane, and Dane just compiled these time lapses for us today. So one of them, I took it and I fast forwarded it here, so we have the whole, not quite half a week or so, just zoomed in a couple of seconds here, so you can see more at a better speed some of these patterns, right? So I have it in a loop here. So you see that initial flash from it being a cold crater floor to full of lava quite suddenly, and it seems like it just floods the whole thing, right? So we're going to focus on a few features as this thing loops around. One, obviously, this big island in the middle. You can clearly see that it's been rising, right? That's feature number one. And maybe it's hard to tell at this speed, but it kind of jerks. It kind of goes lurch, 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 lurch. It's not exactly a smooth thing. I'd be curious to see some graph of the rising of that surface as well, and maybe it's reflected in the whole lava lake is our best measure there. Right, so that's one part of it. The other part is this west vent over here. You can see started off being attached to the crater wall. Lava surrounded it on both sides, and perhaps has been lifting and injecting into it, but it seems like it's somehow become a cooling source there, right? So it seems like it's that island is growing, and if you look at the size of it here at the end, it's grown to nearly the size of this middle island, which we know is already pretty massive. And so that's another thing to note there. Next, we'll look at these other islets here in the back, and maybe let's see how much I can zoom in. That's pretty good. But what you can see is that this islet in particular seems to go all the way under, and it pops up first, right? And what you see towards the end is all these other islets over here, 1, 2, 3, also start coming up towards the end. And actually, there's even a fourth one somewhere in a range of right in here towards the end frames of this video, right? So this is one way we're going to look at this all real quick. And there is the interesting pattern of it, right? So one thing to note is, you note that this southern, I don't know what we're going to call this Old West Vent Island, maybe? Old West Vent Island is rising at about the same rate as our large island, Big Island. But notably that Old West Vent Island is growing, right? We can look here that this small northeast islet is also rising seemingly in sync with the large island. These ones at the end are starting to look a little bit different, and maybe you might notice there's a little bit of a wiggle on this one right here at the end, like it starts to move separately from the rest. So in order to look at that kind of detail, we're going to look at a slower version here coming up, but before we move on from this fast version where it's easy to see these long-term progressions, you can see a couple other things here. One is this perched levee. It's building up along the edge right in here. You can see it really well, especially in this area right there, where you see this dark blue line, purple line right there. That's the edge of that levee, that barrier. It's almost like an above-ground swimming pool, and we call it a perched pond. And that's formed as slabs of this crust pile up and inject and essentially build up this levee. And because the lava lake is circulating and it's pushing on it and altering it, modifying it all the time, you see overflows that go across and breach this barrier and then flood what's now become a trench around the rim of the crater, right? So maybe we'll call this like the rim trench or something like that, or to be clarified. And this is something that's seen here on this in this image. North is that way, so it's visible on the north, on the east, and all the way over to the south sides as well. So maybe I can scroll it over. And this is not the best camera angle to see that from, but that goes all the way around to over here. You can see a few of these little overflows flashing quickly here. When we look at this a little slower, we can see that as well. So that's another one of those features, and the lake's grown big enough we can't really see this very southern end of it, but over here on the west side, you can see a little bit all the way up to the west vent. You're starting to have that levee as well, and then not as much on the north side of it. But there is an interesting thing happening here with this North Island, or this Old West Vent Island here. And Old West Vent Island is starting to grow a spine here, the northeast, visible here at the end, right there. It's interesting to see, this is that old surface rising up. What's going on there? This is one spot we can see that happening. We can scroll over here a little bit where our former north vent used to be, right? That was all buried in that crust. And you can maybe see its old edge. That might be what that is right there, rising out of that surface as well. So we're starting to see all this topography starting to emerge from the lava lake. And it's not because the lava is dropping down back underneath it. It's because that piston head is rising enough that most of the lava is erupting underneath it now and not as much above it. Something along those lines, right? So it's interesting. We've talked about the historical patterns of the whole epimagma plug that existed 100 years ago or so, and how you might get to that. And this is interesting to consider these processes as maybe part of that, right? And we'll note some of the other features and processes going on here to kind of add to our observations and hopefully eventually tie it all together. The next thing I want to look at is the progression of the fountains. Our most vigorous one is down here on the west. I'm going to call this the New West Vent because we have the Old West Vent over there. So New West, I'll call that. And you can see that it's not active at the very beginning, but it very quickly within a frame starts putting out a whole bunch of flow that goes off in that direction for the most part. All right, we can look over here. This one up here is that southernmost vent, right along that edge of the crater, and it's kind of long right through there, right? And then there's one that's been called the south central vent, more or less in here. And you can see that it's there also. And then there's some more on the backside of this island, which have been called the central island vents. And you can see that, you know, there's maybe an intermediate southern central vent there, and these island vents are more in here. And for the most part, you can see this progression of most of these central fountains dying off from being more active early on to less active here. To this very last frame, it's hard to tell. We'll pause it later on, but it's almost like this flow is perhaps slowing down, almost stopping coming out of that area, just like it stopped everywhere else we can see. And maybe that's because it's pushing underneath the crust rather than coming through the cracks of that crust inside of this big soup of magma and epimagma. Lava flows on the surface, lava lake. Okay, so that's a whole bunch of things here. We'll zoom it out, and that's the whole bunch of things happening all at once, all sped up and compressed into 2 seconds, over and over. And I think the repetition is good, and it helps to really highlight those patterns there. So what I'll do now is I'm going to close this one, and we're going to go to a longer version of this. So I'll start it from the beginning now. You can see more of this process happening in slow motion now that you know what to look for as far as these central vents, southern vents, western vents. The slow rise of this Old West Island. You can see at this point in time all those islets on the eastern side are all submerged. You only see the northeast one, but all the smaller ones are submerged still. You still see that central island vent active, but most of that early fissure that went north of there seems to have died off pretty early on. But still a very vigorous south central vent right in there. That one's putting out a good amount of flow, you can tell just from the circulation of the surface there. And just to remind you guys, what we're looking from at the from the overlook, public overlook, is more like this corner back over here of that lava lake, right? So in this view, so you might see a couple of little spattering things, and the plates moving. That motion is all going right to left. That's the flow we're seeing right there of that pattern. So what I'll do now is since it played all the way through, I'm going to just drag it and see if I can highlight a couple of things here at the end and see if I can get this to the right size and location, right? It's going to be a little tricky, but so I want to keep an eye on these islands and this island, the relative movement of all those things. I'll just drag it back and forth a little bit here. But what you might notice is it appears like towards the end of this video here, like both of these islands are drifting away from this large island right here. And so you see that change right there. That's just later on, and early on they were moving together. So this is before moving together, right there, and after moving apart. And you guys see the difference, I hope. And so that's a clear change, and that's really interesting because that is one of the signs of what's going on beneath this circulating lava lake that we can tell at fairly shallow depth, right? We know that these things were sticking up in the range of 20, 40 feet or so, right? So that lava lake is probably only has that much liquid until it reaches that old crust beneath which there's a whole bunch more liquid, right? So there's a whole bunch of, it's not really fair to say it's only 20 or 40 feet deep because there's like underneath the piston, there's a huge amount of lava as well that goes most of the way back to that original crater floor. But so now you can imagine that if lava came up and through that original crack in that piston head, and now pieces of the piston head are moving independently, that it may be fracturing that piston head. And so that'd be interesting to see if we see more flows coming up and through, or if these things become detached. If what is it really the whole crust that this thing is sitting on, or is it only this pile of lighter, looser material that's floating on the surface that it detach and start floating up? That's not quite clear from what we can see here, but those are the possibilities there. I see the question pop up here. Will these islands eventually melt into liquid magma? They can. That's a hard thing to answer. Depending on how much material you have, if you have a whole bunch more cold, like a big area like this, then it's probably lava that comes on top of here is actually going to freeze and create a veneer, and that veneer that happens layer after layer may protect the core of a large, colder object like this. Now, if you have something really small, then depending on the volume of the lava that it's in, you can start having more of that melting effect. And that's as I'm going to leave it very general without any numbers, just like that, right? That's the general pattern of it, right? So there is the that aspect I really wanted to point out there. And here, while we have it on frozen frame, you can really see more easily this spine coming from Old West. It's starting to move here, and this may connect to the levee over here, right? This is kind of what we had before. So we may end up having a levee that ends up, we'll see what happens in this corner is interesting right here, right? This corner right here, because up until recently in the time lapse, I'll show you guys, the lava is flowing through this channel back here. But as this island is rising and growing, it's starting to raise this little isthmus, and it's going to isolate it, so the lava may actually be forced around this way, and you might end up having a boundary like this. So this is what we're seeing, the shape of it forming as it is now, right? Coming and retreating in from the crater wall is a little bit there. And so, let's see, did I pull up? No, I didn't. Let me see if I can. So what I'd like to do is find my video that I made for the last eruption, and I'm going to throw it on here to show you guys. Because it's interesting to consider whether we might have a similar kind of pattern or not. So let me play that. And in that case, we had the whole lava lake crest over fairly quickly after about a month into the eruption or so. Maybe it was only 2 weeks into the eruption or so, 2 or 3 weeks or so. So that's the curiosity there. And let's see if I can pull up this video here. I know it's in here somewhere. There it is. Throw it on here. And that's our last eruption beginning in December. Sped up really fast, like we're talking about 10,000 times. But showing that progression of the whole thing flooding and then closing off, right? This is Old West vent down here, Old North vent over here, and our New West vent being down here, and our island still emerges through there. So I'll play it again. You can see how that island came to be from that initial flood into that lake of water at the beginning, and then how we formed the levees, which eventually closed off and retreated close to the vent, especially as the lava level rose up and drowned that vent. So that's something, a correlation we saw last time with both the north vent and the west vent, was that as the lava lake came up to that original fissure level that we saw from very early on in this eruption, because early on we had just a lake of water down here, and then we had, where is it? Come on, give me a. Then we had a north vent higher up in the lava lake, and then we had a west vent higher up in the lava lake, and eventually the lava lake came up and drowned that west one as well. And it switched from north to west when the north one got drowned. And there's that retreating pattern of the surface of the lava lake. So I thought I'd throw this back in here. I won't show it every time, but as we talk about it and consider the possibilities, and we start to see some of the progression of what's happening now, I think it's really useful to consider where we came from, consider how long this big piece of land has been sitting there. So these look similar, right? This has been sitting here for a long, long time, whereas this is newly forming, right? That's the interesting thing here. And that gives you an idea more of why I might call the same area that's emerging here at the end. Let's see if I can get it to show away. Over here, this perhaps being our former north vent. That was on the crater wall, but the crater wall was vertically below here, and so as it's been lifted up and lifted from its location, there's more of a gap between the crater wall and that old cinder and spatter cone. So, does that make sense? All right, so that's the thermal summary. And yeah, I should have mentioned, maybe off the top, that Kilauea, I can see you guys talking about it, HVO did just lower the alert level back to orange. Dan, you want to jump in here and tell me what's going on with that?
Yeah, they went ahead and lowered it at 321 HST. No, sorry, they lowered it about an hour ago, I believe. But anyways, they are mentioning that the eruption at the start was averaging around 885,000 tons of SO2 per day. And now it's down to about 12 tons per day. They've also lowered I'm told by one of our pilots, friends, Scott Wilson, that the TFR, the temporary flight restriction that was placed up there, initially at 34,000 feet has been lowered now down to 9,000 feet as well.
Right, and I do believe, I hadn't had a chance to line that up today, but I do believe that we finally got Bruce Mori and McCalburn here, and they have some content out as well.
Yeah,
so
they do.
Maybe we'll bring that up for you guys, see how much time we have at the end, or what have you, and then can pass it to me.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's the
I'll grab it and send it to you.
That's the pattern there, 12,000 tons from 85,000 tons, and lowering the alert level from watch to orange, right? So that's typical. They do see. Let me read the remarks here. The remarks. I might change my highlight color here. Remarks, prognosis. It is unclear how long the current eruption will continue. Kilauea summit eruptions over the past 200 years have lasted from less than a day to more than a decade. The ongoing eruption is similar to the most recent Kilauea eruption, which was also confined to Hale-Ma'uma'u crater and generated a lava lake. The most recent eruption lasted approximately 5 months, from December 2020 to May 2021. So that's something that, Dave and I were just discussing earlier today. We'll talk about the signals here, but, the fact that you see this whole piston head still rising as the lava is erupting through the bottom of the lava lake, there's still enough pressure to push all of that up. And we don't, and even though the gases are coming down and plateauing, they're plateauing somewhere in a range of 10,000 tons per day, which is a pretty massive amount. Which means it seems like even though it peaked quickly and came down quickly, if it plateaus more and extends out longer, it could certainly drag on for a while. Right? So the signs now are looking like there's no sign of it ending, and not really necessarily of it slowing down here. And we'll show you guys some of the data of what there is there. It's just the patterns are changing, right? So, and it's hard to tell because you could have just so much lava coming out and going all underneath that crust and rising it up, and so the whole surface topography is changing in interesting ways. We really need to look at the level of the whole thing as a whole coming up, right? That whole total bulk volume coming up is what we'll have to look at. So that's the details there on our volcanic alert level. So let me come back to, we're going to check in one more time on the current F1 image, right? Because maybe this is a little easier to see what's going on. Just to make sure, because as even though we put these things together as quickly as we can, and as close as we can to our broadcast, things change on a minute-by-minute basis. So peeking in here, we still see an active new west vent here in the bottom right of our image. We still see an active south vent a little bit, and the south central one a little bit more as well, right? So really the south central and the western one, and really there's not a whole lot of sign of circulation there or there. But we can also come back and we can lean on this last 24 hours time lapse, which includes a little bit of this most recent frames, and take a peek at that as well. So in this view, it's a little easier to see this perched edge forming around here on the side, and now I can actually see a little bit of it coming in right here, just as I was just talking about earlier. I can actually see that coming up in a frame here. And let's see if I can get it to zoom in a little more right there. That little, there's a little spine right in here. Yeah. Fascinating stuff, and even back over here, right? So we'll talk about the details as we go through the photographs as a visual tour of what's going through here, and I believe we will do that next. So here is the view looking from the south. This is like the view, like you can actually see the whole crater, but this is the more or less that S1 camera view. Although the S1 web camera view only takes in about that much on the ground, so this is nice to have that wider from a view, even if it's just once in a while. Okay, so that's our general orientation, our new west vent, our old west vent island right there. Here is our south central vent peeking out a little bit, and here, I can zoom into it, you see that edge of that central island vent, right? And interesting, you can see there's actually a couple of cones, we'll get a better view of this later, a couple of cones spattered on top of here, and in fact, this stuff is glowing, right? So there's a crack that's actually erupting through this island a little bit on the very, very edge, and dropping, building a new feature on the edge of it there. So that was a little earlier. It's not quite as clear as that's still going on. That's why it's interesting to look at that. And here we get a little bit better view. From the perspective the geologists have, it's hard to really see this southern vent. This cliff is in the way a little bit, but they can see that. That's how we're gonna get the view we're gonna get of it right there. And then looking, I guess I couldn't zoom out. I have to click the button. Looking at the other edges, here we can see that perched rim around the edge right there. We see some of these little islets have re-emerged. There's that larger northeast islet right there. This may be that old north vent island, perhaps. And that's more or less our orientation there, okay? So we'll look at these features in turn with USGS photographs. So here's the edge of the perched pond, right there. You can see the lava flow ponding, and you see the cracks in that crest. And all this stuff that's silvery is all the active lava lake. This is lighter silver stuff right in here. This is all that liquid underneath. Over here, not as much. This darker color is showing... here, I'll zoom it in. And darker color is showing the flows that are spilling over this edge. Like there's one right there, and then they basically they're able to harden all the way as individual flows. That's a slightly different feature. I'll keep doing that. All right, so that's one perspective of it there, and I want to make sure that we go back and look at the captions that USGS is providing, because they're offering a lot of good information. The captions is not in all the other places, right? So for the past few days, a levee has formed around most of the lake's perimeter to create a lake that's perched several meters above the solidified outer rim. So right now, they're saying that this is about 3 meters or 10 feet high, that edge right there, right? So coming back into it, I'll zoom back in. That is 10 feet tall, 3 meters tall, right there, that edge. So here's another view from a different angle. And in this view, we're looking to the northeast. You can see an overflow through a breach in that levee wall right in there. Still may advance this forward as well. And you can see a similar pattern. I'm going to zoom it into up here. A little blurry, but there is that edge of the levee there, and here is that breach. Right? The flow just was able to push that out, and at some point it'll block itself back up. It'll, in the meantime, fill this trench with a giant flow in the meantime. So, so there we go. That's the zoom in on that, and well, there's one more here, looking more at that southern edge, that southern rim. So it's really overflowing everywhere. Mahalo to Lilda Smither. She's just been all the USGS has been great, but I noticed that all the pictures that I chose as the ones that I thought were my favorites today were by Ms. Smither. So I'd like to mahalo her especially. Let's move on here and show you guys this B1 camera, right? So the B1 camera, this is the last 24 hours view, and I know that it gets really washed out at night, and there's a lot you can't really see. It's discontinuous and all that, which is why we like to look at the F1 camera as our better way to monitor through day and night. But what I really want you guys to see is this southern perched edge right over here we're just talking about, right? There's a perched edge right over there, and you can see these overflows coming over the course of the last 24 hours, especially over there. And you can see them happening over here as well. On this northeast side, you can see some overflows and some flashes and some patches of glow in that trench right over there, for example. So this is what it looks like, a little bit animated, right? It's obviously a little bit jerky because these images, for this camera especially, I want to say only come through every half an hour. So that's a little bit less smooth, I suppose, right? But you can really see the overall pattern. So we're looking from the east, and there's our large island right there. The new west vent is this bright spot way here in the back, and that's what's flashing, brightening the scene. That's really washing out the camera. That middle west vent is in here, so that could be helping to that as well. There's that south central vent right over there, and so what we're going to do is we're going to move from where we are here on this eastern edge of the lake. We're going to start working our way back around towards the south. We'll look at that south vent next. So here is a zoomed in view of that south vent and south central vent, and let's read the description here. A telephoto image of the south central lava fountain taken from the south rim. This fissure continues to produce sustained lava fountain heights of 5 to 10 meters, 16 to 33 feet, with occasional bursts of spatter. So USGS photo once again by Lilda Smither. Mahalo. Probably should be another apologies there, right? I probably should be calling her Dr. Smither. People in our community we maybe feel more familiar with, but I won't excuse myself there. So there's a view from the south central vent. Here is another view of that south central fountain a little earlier. That was a little further north, right? There's one that's a little further this way and one a little bit further this way. And this one is the most vigorous source. And it's saying here it's 35 meters, 115 feet long, with sustained fountains of 5 to 10 meters, 16 to 33 feet. So that's the different view of that image there. Okay, we're going to move on to the central island now. And we talked about this as well, but let me read the caption first before we zoom in on it here. The low fountain site across along the southeast side of the main island has built a small cone approximately 5 meters, 16 feet tall on the edge of the island. Occasional spatter was ejected from the vent at the top of the cone. So it actually was erupting, ejecting some spatter. So this is an interesting thing to zoom in on. Let's go in as close as we can on that. So you can see there that it's coming out at the bottom right here. And it's probably trying to come up underneath this island, and it's forced to the side. But somehow there's also some pathway that's coming up here. At least a gas vent, and enough that the gas is occasionally coughing out some chunks of lava. That's one way to think of it. And so there's that southern flow, or southern island vent, and that's the height of that cone right there, right, 5 meters or 16 feet or so. Right, and you maybe see more fume. It's interesting to think about. Maybe this crack goes back in some distance in here. I'm not sure exactly. Hard to tell what the geometry is underneath there, right? But you clearly can see there's a lot of cracking and a whole bunch of fuming coming out, degassing happening even right in there. So interesting. You see some different colorations. It's kind of a different temperature of lava, like slightly cooler, slightly farther, and that depends mostly on a distance from the vent. So different vents are coming and are meeting, and you can see lava of different colors here, right? Kind of meeting at the edge as they come from different vents and are slightly different temperatures meeting together. This is that boundary on that north side, and there's a similar one that's not quite as visible over here on the southern side, because the southern vents are also putting out lava in this direction, and then there's a meeting right there, right? And so early on, that flow was going all the way around over here, and now we can see that flow has been pinched off, and that boundary, that dividing line of the flows, has also wrapped its way around to here. What you got, Dane?
Well, I was thinking about throwing in some questions about the lake that I'm seeing.
Okay.
People are tossing around.
Right, okay, so I only have a little bit more to okay. I want to talk about the west vent here, because that's the last piece of it, and that's an important component. So once we kind of go through the orientation of the lake, we'll have all these images to lean back on. So to just illustrate where we are, this is the S1 camera from the south. There is that large island. Here's that south central vent animated. Here's that central island vent illuminated. You can see that glowing degassing source right in there when you look closely. And the most vigorous source of the eruption is over here on a west, this new west vent. And that's what we'll focus on to just finish this initial look through. We can take some questions. So here's a detailed view of it. And they're saying that the sustained lava fountain heights here are 33 to 49 feet, 10 to 15 meters. That's the height of the lava shot up here. And so that's why it's building this large spatter cone, horseshoe-shaped spatter cone on 3 sides, because obviously on this side it's open to the lava. It just pours into the lava lake. And the lava lake has actually risen, and this is why I wanted to show this image in particular. The lava lake has risen to the level of the base of this vent, right? So as we consider the patterns of last time, and lava drowning vents, and it actually causing changes in the dynamics of the eruption, we have to consider whether that might happen here, until we remember the lava shooting up through the middle of the lake, bubbling through that submerged crust and lifting the whole thing up as a piston. So it seems like with that much pressure, a little drowning here may not matter, because we're still sustaining lava flows in the middle, lava fountains in the middle of that lake, in that south central fountain. That's one view. Here's another view of that west vent from a slightly different angle. You get a better view of this horseshoe-shaped cone and how it's piling up all this material against the crater wall right here. It just falls in this little saddle right in there, and it collects and grows it higher and higher and higher and higher. And what we saw in the last eruption is it won't be unusual to see chunks of this thing collapse. And if some of these chunks of the things collapse into the lake, that's how you start forming more of these little islets. And once it gets big enough, then you can start to see that kind of thing happening. All right, so let me get here and just finish a couple of these last summary of the visuals, and before we turn to any data, we'll take the questions. So the the USGS has also released a slider before and after view. Let's see if I can get it to zoom in and still work. The before and after kind of worked. I dragged it too far, zoomed it out too far, I suppose. There. Before and then after. And you can see how the island has shifted position. I like to look at this back wall right in here. Right? This is likely the lowest spot where I can start to trickle onto this area and eventually come over here. And it's hard to tell like the microtopography from all those DEMs, right? Because we kind of get it averaged in. But if you look in comparison to where the lava is right there, it doesn't look too far from that point. It's getting pretty close right over there where we might at some point, when we see the overflows from above this perched levee, right? I said above this perched levee start to go this way, maybe eventually they'll start to lap on a little further onto that ledge right over there. Something cool to look for right there. That's the last thing. So just to wrap it up, the 24-hour time lapse from the KW camera. So it's hard to tell all the individual features. It's more the big picture from here. There's that new west vent, south central vent there. That's more southern vent, central island vent there, and our west vent island. If you're curious what it actually looks like in the daytime, reload this so we don't have split shadow on there. There. You're curious what that looks like in the daytime here. You can see that big mountain. It looks like it's getting pretty tall as well. Hard to measure from here. I'm interested to hear what USGS has to say about these measurements on this new or this old west vent island. A lot of features to keep track of. I'm forgetting the terms I'm using myself. So I'll just flash this up here one more time while we can consider some questions here. This is our 24-hour. This is our half a week. Really sped up the whole eruption so far view of the changes in lava lake. So, all right, Dan, let's turn to some questions.
All right. Do want to first shout out some super chats that we got and some donations on hawaiitracker.com/support. That is the best way to directly support us if you are so inclined. But just being here, liking, subscribing, consider sharing the video, all that really helps as well. So I do have a 1999 super chat from Laura Todd who says, "So cool. Thanks for all the information you guys put together for us. I appreciate the support there." And the second one is Julie Fowler, who says, "It's like having a geologist on staff. Thanks for all you guys do for your community, and appreciate that as well." So with that, we do have a couple questions. Actually, a good amount of questions. I did send you mix in Bruce's stuff if you want to pull that up for later.
Yeah, okay.
So first is a general advisory statement. Sandcastles 808 says that they live in Upper Mountain View, Glenwood, and got Pele's hair in between their toes while wearing slippers out in the yard. That happened yesterday, and the neighbors scratched their truck windshield when they turned on the wipers.
In Mountain
So
View, huh?
just that's
So that's normally upwind, and you maybe wouldn't expect it, but some of the light stuff can get carried in a loft, especially overnight when we get slack winds or that kind of thing. So yeah, great community advice there. Mahalo.
So do want to highlight that, and that Pele's hair is nasty if you get it in you, embedded, and don't get it in your eyes, whatever you do. So back to the lava lake. Sharon asks, are the vents originating from the sides of the crater or horizontally or vertically from below?
Both, right? It seemed like it came through the wall of the crater on the west side. It seemed like it came through the wall of the crater on the south side a little bit, and that south side crack might be the continuation of the one that goes underneath the whole crater, and it's coming up through the bottom of it and through the liquid. So both.
All right. Randy says that this is more of a statement, but I thought it was pretty cool. Randy Marsh says the scale of the crater is truly awesome. The island in the center of the lake is the size of all 4 U.S. Iowa-class battleships side by side. Just incredible. Wow. I didn't, fact check that, but if that's true, that's, it's big.
Yeah.
We have done comparisons with it before. We dropped, what was it, like a cruise liner on it?
Yeah, it is about as long as a cruise liner, that middle island, right. Yeah. And it's, you probably can fit 3 of them side by side for its width kind of thing. Yeah. Randy Marsh, famous cartoon geologist from South Park. Not the same Randy Marsh.
Right. All right, so Christy asks, how are these, this is maybe for a lot of the new viewers as well, how are the islands formed? Like we we know that the islands were there prior and lava started filling in, but then we started to see like on the south side from the F1 camera, the thermal, we started to see that island growing. So what do you think is behind that?
It's something to do with the fact that it has all that loose material. Essentially, it's a pile of loose spatter and cinder. Like as it falls hot, it can kind of weld to the other chunks below it, but it's only like one blob and another blob, another blob. It's almost like if you've ever done like a wax dripping with a candle and just drip chunks of wax. They can pile up on each other, but they're all separate globs and they each have their own little margins, which means that they can break apart and be kind of crumbly. And there's void space in between them. There's gaps, and so the way I imagine it is lava is able to inject into those gaps, and then it's hardening in there or cooling in there, and then the whole thing is forming this pad beneath it, and that pad is getting pushed up. And there's got to be some cooling effect or something like that also, which is interesting, which I can't quite, I just don't know enough to speak more on, right? But something's going on that's allowing it to actually grow by some kind of cooling effect. And so, not only that, you might wonder if that what looks like a continuous piston might be getting deformed and bulged in areas to the side. Right? Maybe it can push up there easier in other places because there's less confining pressure. I don't know. Those are just some ideas. I don't have an answer. It's like a little bit of a discussion of what that could be. And so all the islets that we've seen form recently have all been from chunks of the cinder from these fountains at the margins of the cone, or chunks of the other islands breaking apart. The very first one was also cinder, but with a slightly different context in that when it first came out, when the 2020 eruption first began, December 20th, there was nothing in that crater except a giant lake of water. So all that liquid water is where all that lava fell into. And so that whole chunk that was a lake became an island of cooled lava spatter. And then as lava flow came underneath that thing, it also injected into it and lifted it up early on. That's what that first video I showed you of the last eruption was like, was essentially that similar process, right? So it's a little different now because there's no water, and but I imagine a similar kind of thing where you have some bulk of cinder that has some void space, and you're having some interaction of the magma trying to inject its way in there and cool a little bit, and then buoy it upwards, and maybe make it a larger structure that starts to seesaw its way, and for lack of a better term, pushed upwards by whatever deformation is happening of that caress from below.
All right, we do have a $20 super chat from Michael. Oh, I'm going to butcher this. Sajaj sorry. $20, no comment. Sorry for butchering the name. Really appreciate the support. So we do have another question here that Ken asked, do you think that this eruption might be able to reach up to the lower terrace to escape the Halemaumau crater, or do we have to wait until the next eruption for that to happen?
I think it might. I think that lower terrace is, we estimated before, like we knew that it was definitely below 800 meters above sea level. And, depending exactly how you measure, it might be 780-ish kind of thing. So we might be getting pretty close to it, actually lapping onto it a little bit. I think that might not be that far away. It all depends on how much volume is coming out. And so we'll look at the lava lake depth graph to get some idea of how that dynamic is playing out. As well as, showing you guys a graph of the SO2, which is our best proxy for how much lava is coming out at a time. The lava output is proxied by the SO2 emissions as well.
All right. Sandra asked, do you think that the movement of the islands is driven by gas rising, or from gas pressure, or from new lava coming through the vents?
Well, so the magma itself has got dissolved gas in it that as it's rising up will form the bubbles, and that bubble could certainly, so you certainly have gas in the magma, and so the magma itself is just buoyant. So I think of it as a whole magma altogether as a buoyant fluid that's coming up, all together, and that's what's pushing it up. But yes, the gas is some effect of it, and a lot of times that is the one of the driving mechanisms for lava to actually erupt when it comes to a shallow point underneath the ground. Because below that depth, the bubbles are dissolved all the way inside a liquid, and once you depressurize it, the bubbles start to nucleate and come out, and that's what causes it to erupt. It's similar to shaking a bottle of soda pop or a bottle of champagne, and you pop the cork and you depressurize it, and all that dissolved gas can just come flying out, and it just brings the liquid with it. So yes, the gas is an important part of it.
All right. To this last question for this round, Great Dane Lovers is asking kind of the real question a lot of people in the Lower East Rift Zone ask. Is there any risk the larger caldera floor could further collapse like the spectacular collapse it did in 2018? We go into like another collapse sequence potentially.
So the volcano is really unpredictable. It's hard, hard to say that it can't collapse. It's going to collapse again someday. It's just a matter of when and how. The reassuring thing to me is that we don't have anywhere near the volume in that crater that we had in 2018. We think that the 2020 eruption, 2020 to back through May, got us 5% of the way recovered of how much volume we lost through the previous collapse. And we know we haven't reached that same volume from this eruption yet. So, we're not, we're still like way less than 10%. Maybe we're up to 7% or 6% in that range of it. That's ballpark where we are. So just based on that, even if you did have a little collapse, it wouldn't mean necessarily that it would trigger anything further down a rift. And if it did, it may not trigger it nearly as far as a lower East Rift Zone. And the Middle East Rift Zone is the most likely place that happens. And I know that when we start having that kind of sequence of Middle East Rift Zone being active, we can talk with more concern about that, right? And even then, it's going to be an infrequent thing for lava to go from the Middle East Rift Zone down to the lower East Rift Zone. So it's always possible. We can never predict what's happening. Sometimes it surprises us. Especially when you have some batch of fresh magma coming from below, it can start finding the pathways and reconfiguring the volcano. But we don't see the signs of any of that kind of thing happening now. I say it's good. It certainly is possible because it will happen someday. So at some point in time, that's going to happen. But there's no reason to believe it's going to happen right now. That's the bottom line, and that's why we keep an eye on it all the time, and we're watching for that all the time as well. Any sign of change, and not to be like living in fear, but because we want to inform people of what's really happening, regardless of whether it's good news or bad news. Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, that'll do it for the first round of questions. If you do have more questions, drop them in the chat, and we'll do one more round at least before we wrap it up. We do have a 27.99 CA super chat from Sandra. Says, thank you so much for the excellent update. Much appreciated. Thank you for the support. And I'll be back in a little bit.
All right. So, we were talking about the lake depth, and that's what I'll do here. We'll transition back to our quick animation of the lava levels rising, right? This big picture is something to notice as well. Lava level here at the end compared to the beginning. So it's, remember that this is an inverted funnel, like an ice cream cone. So as it rises up, it's more and more volume per same amount of height that it gains. So one way to look at this is that automatic laser rangefinder. Let's see, how much can I zoom out from here? That's not, you can't really see it on here, but that rangefinder is up here on that eastern rim, and it shoots down to a point that's somewhere over here. So what you might imagine is that as a lava lake rises and you have this island coming up as well, at some point that thing might get in the way. And maybe more importantly, the point that you were measuring as the surface of the lava lake before is getting awfully close to being the surface or piece of the island. So we might start to see some funny things happening here on our depth chart, and that's just something to prequel what we are going to see here, right? So this is the last week of data. I'll make sure to refresh it so we can see what funny stuff is happening. But we can see here, over the last week that when eruption began, it gained quite a lot of depth very quickly. That's similar to the eruption that happened in 2020. But then fairly quickly it turned to having that more expected, predicted pattern where it grows up at some rate, something like this, right? And with little variations, of course. And we know that now that the lava surface is not even from one side to the next, and we'll recap that for you guys here when we talk about the values. But we can see that we were rising, and our highest point here on the right side was pretty close to this 260, maybe 259. And then suddenly it looks like we have a drop, like the lava level dropped by, where are we at there? 5 meters or so. So that's something funny is going on there. And it seems hard to believe that there could have been a hole right in that spot. So I wonder if they didn't point this to a different place to reset, to a better place to measure the lake, to reset and go from here. We'll have to wait and hear what this actually means, or if we got to a piece of where that island is blocking off the flow and it really is a 5-meter hole and it's pointing in the hole. I don't know. There's something funny happening here. This is why I wanted to point out that measuring spot. Something funny is going on. So this is all a big asterisk to me there, and I'm really taking a point of where the lava level is closest, most recently we knew to be right there. Excuse me. So that corresponds to depth here of 259 meters, right in there. And we started off at 226. Right, so based on that, just this measurement of this particular spot the laser is, this shows 33, right, 26 to 59, yeah, 33 meters. And that would be 108 feet of total gain since the beginning of the eruption. Now, the USGS is giving a slightly different number, and it may be that because the things they're measuring in a different place, or something else. So there's some other variable that we're not accounting for here. Right, but this is the overall pattern we're seeing, and you can see it was still rising until whatever was starting to happen funny here at the end, and now we have to rely more so on the text updates, or maybe we ignore this little window. We pick it back up here at the very, very far right end and look at what this trend is doing, right, for the days ahead. So that's something to keep in mind there. So I wanted to show you guys where this information is coming from and highlight some of these numbers. The most recent update today, prior to the changing of the alert level, I will, so at this point in time I was still warning red, but now it's tomorrow, as we'll see, will be what is it, advisory orange or alert orange, you know? And so we will note here the measurements were measured as 14,750 on October 2nd. We got a measurement of 12,000 most recently. From the most recent thing, but really the meat of this is over here in this lake observations right in here. So let me see if I can show this to you guys a little better. Over the past 24 hours, the lava lake's risen 2 meters. If we go back to the update the day before that, I'll just jump back right there. Yesterday it said in total it's risen 27 meters. So if we take 27 plus 2, that gives us 29. So that's something's off between 29 and 33. So I'm not sure exactly what that discrepancy is, but that's part of it right there. So back to today. The west vent is the most vigorous source with sustained fountain heights of 10 to 15 meters, 33 to 49 feet, but with bursts up to, I'll add, 20 meters, 66 feet, right? So that's the peak, 66 feet, 20 meters from that west vent. So that means that Drano is, if it's doing that kind of high burst, then you might be able to start seeing it from some of those areas, especially in that southern area, southern part of Kīlauea, where we have heard reports of people seeing the lava from as well, but it's not as easy to tell exactly where. And some of what I've heard has been from rangers who may have been in enclosed areas. So that's part of it as well. I'm not sure exactly what's publicly viewable all the time consistently compared to the north there. So they note the lake has risen to the base. The lake. Try again. The lava lake has risen to the base of the west vent, around which a 12-meter high, 40-foot spatter rampart is being built. That's the height of that cone, 12 meters, 40 feet high. Other vents, including a 35 to 42-meter long fissure, that's 115 feet to 138 feet. That's that south central fissure that's active. Sustained fountains of 5 to 10 meters, 16 to 33 feet. That's the one that's coming through the lake. It's coming up 30 feet, up to 30 feet through the lake. Due to the location of the vents, the lava lake is not level across its surface. Areas closer to the vents are higher in elevation. Yesterday evening, the west end of the lake is approximately 1 to 2 meters, 3 to 7 feet higher than the east end. And the south end was approximately 2 to 3 meters, 7 to 10 feet higher than the north end. Right, so it's higher closer to the south and to the west where the vents are. So that's really showing, that's that bulging effect I'm talking about. The lava's coming out, where it's coming out in the vents, it's pushing, it's lifting the lake upwards, and the lake is flowing down from those directions to those other to the north and to the east, right? It's not exactly, it can't really circulate as easily that way you'd imagine if it's inclined and tilted, right? Bowed and deformed. That's an interesting configuration. That's not what we had before. And They note the trench there, the north and east boundaries of the lava lake are separated from Hawaiʻi crater by wall by narrow ledges, approximately 20 meters wide, 66 feet. That's the edge of the size of that trench. That are lower in elevation than the active portion of the lava lake. The northeast and south sides are perched several meters, approximately 10 feet above the surrounding ledge. And localized and discontinuous crestal foundering still going on. That's the overturning of the crest. So that's the highlights there. There's not a whole lot of change elsewhere. So, you know, I did point out this feature from the update from yesterday on Sunday. I want to make sure we catch up a little bit and just make sure that we point out the highlights there. I believe that was what I wanted to point out for the Sunday one. But back on Saturday, there's an interesting note in here as well, which says, so fountain heights. Occasional fountain height bursts have been observed over the past 24 hours, including a burst this morning with estimated heights of 50 to 60 meters, 55 to 66 yards. Like that was on Saturday morning. And I didn't see anyone post anything like a giant firework exploding above the crater, but that's what you would have caught if you were photographing it exactly at that time. But that's the interesting thing there. 50 to 60 meters is well above that lower ledge and the area where we need line of sight. So depending on if this kind of thing happens, and potentially no matter where you are on a caldera, you might see that thing burst up into view. So that's pretty interesting right there to note that. I thought that was worth bringing up this old update just to see that. So this has been a lot of text, so I'm going to give you guys here this USGS cheat sheet notes version on Twitter, which is, you know, perhaps an easier way to read it than to go into all the detail unless you're looking for all the details. But here's a summary. West Bend fountains, 30 to 50 feet high. Lava lake perched, 10 feet high levees. Lake Fisher fountains, 16 to 33 feet high. Lake level is the level of the West Vent, but the lake isn't flat all the way across. That is the short and sweet version, shortest and sweetest version from the USGS that we have there. So looking at some of the signals, we want to look at the gas. Here's our year-long plot, so we can compare to before. We mentioned yesterday how we didn't have a measurement within minutes of this thing opening up, so it could have peaked higher as well and come down. And likewise, we had a peak high and we're coming down as well. And so this kind of squished together here. It seemed like it came down faster, like it took longer for it to come down here, and I'm like wider. But that may be irrelevant potentially if it's going to plateau at a different level. This one came back down. You can see it's plateauing this level right down here. In comparison, we're a little bit offset to up right here, right? So you can see that's our difference. We still got to come down a good amount, and we were, you know, we can see even back here when we had our initial plateau with this 2020 eruption, it was a little bit lower than this halfway point of 10,000 and 12,000 would be right in there. So that's an interesting thing to me is like when we look at this plateau, where is that going to happen here on the right? This is all scrunched together, so naturally we're going to move to the month-long plot right here in the middle. This is showing before the eruption, and just to note this is in times 10 to the 5 tons per day, right? So that's the 20,000, and that's the 85,000. So 85,000 down to 20,000, down to a couple in a range between 14 and 15, maybe up to 16. So really, it's been this range of between, we'll call it 12 and 16 right in here. That's been what I'm calling this plateau, with a little variation, with the variations natural through there, right? That's blown up a little more for you guys to see, right? This cluster of points right here, right, is kind of really not that different statistically from each other compared to, you know, what you'd see to this one or to that one. Right, so that's the interesting thing with the gas, is if the diffusion rate, that gas output stabilizes at a higher level, then you might be looking at a larger push than we had back in 2020. Where really the main push only lasted a week and the rest of it was like a slower output, even though it gained quite a bit of volume in the end. You know, a huge amount was in that first week. Our ambient measurements, Cone Peak, middle of Southwest Rift, reaching over 8 ppm. Sand Hill, closer to the summit, 12 ppm. And furthest at Kīlauea, up to 8 ppm, but really much better recently, down to 2 ppm or so. But really showing that, you know, depending on the gas, and the gas is actually blowing into these sensors or across these sensors frequently enough that we're seeing continual ambient air spikes in here. As far as our air quality, Most of the markers are actually showing green, right? So you can see there's all, we can look at our PM is in the green, SO2 mostly in the green, but we can also go back and look at some of the histories. You know, the green is not at 0, it's at this 31 level, and you kind of see that even though we've been at green the whole time, we're still getting pretty close to this threshold of yellow right in there. So certainly the VOG is still around, still visible. I'm sure we can have lots of our viewers attest to that. Right? So that's the air quality at a glance right there. And if you're planning to come visit National Park, it's all green there on the ground as well, pretty much everywhere, even over in Kahuku. So I can scan across this down here, but it's all green, 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 green. It's been green all day, everywhere in the park. Really, it's been great viewing conditions over there. Park being right in here, we can see most of the VOG is not staying in that area, it's blowing away, and you can see a lot of it blowing across the Ka'u Desert in the National Park, which is uninhabited. But once it gets further to this area over here, then you start having Pahala, Ocean View, Na'alehu area starting to get affected by this output, right? And also wrapping around the Kona side, and you can see it gets caught on side, and you can see patches as far north as Kohala sometimes. Right? If you go to the VMAP webpage, you can actually see the whole state, and it'll show you if it's trailing off further that way. So I'm going to come back up here to this other map. Make sure we give our Na'alehu and Pahala peeps their attention too, because this is a more likely area you're going to have this bad gas, right? We actually hit yellow earlier today in Pahala at 2 a.m. in the morning, and it's been coming down. So you see very wind dependent there. And let's come down to Na'alehu, and haven't quite hit yellow, but did get up to 21. It's not really quite to the yellow threshold quite there, so it's been pretty good in Na'alehu today. By the looks of this measurement anyways, and you can tell us if we're wrong, if you actually live there and are seeing different, right? So, all right, that's the gas. We're going to come in on the earthquakes. Here are the earthquakes for the last week. The way that they're colored is such that the red ones are within the last 2 hours. There's none of those. And the last 2 days is orange, and everything else is yellow. So look for the last 2 days of what's orange. There's not a lot. There's 1, and there's 2. 2 earthquakes registered on this map in the last 2 days. So really the earthquakes are down to very little. Earthquakes are still happening on the island. If we zoom it out a little bit, you can see there's still this whole Pahala sequence still ongoing, still active. There's the most recent one. So, you know, it's kind of independent. We can leave that for a different day as usual because there's too much happening closer to the surface to focus on today. But just to show you guys, that's what the map looks like. Here's what the plot looks like. This is for the past month. So you can see this was our intrusion is way off the plot now. So this is kind of our post-intrusion quiet, and then the reawakening here, and then beginning of the eruption. And since the eruption began, as usual, we come back down to these very, very low levels. So very low levels essentially are coming in at below 40 earthquakes per day, and that's mostly all the Pahala ones that get counted on the edge of that map. So not much in the earthquakes. We'll move on from earthquakes today. Deformation-wise, here is our tilt plots. I will reload it to make sure we're current. So for the last 2 days, you can see our pattern has been all down, but at different rates. A little slower, a little faster. It's almost like a deflation-inflation event superimposed on a overall deflation trend. Downhill more, and then a little less, and a little more. So, you know, it's undulating a little bit there as it's working its way down, but it's still coming down, but it's starting to show, you know, we're wondering when we're going to start to see deflation-inflation events again. Is this the beginning of them right here? Possibly. We'll have to wait and see if this becomes clearer, if this line flattens out, or what's going on here. Not a very big amplitude, right, kind of superimposed there, but you can see 1.5 to 0 microradians is not a whole lot. But to see the patterns is a little interesting there. Looking at the past week as an overall pattern, you can see the actual eruption start right here, where it actually inflated, and then since then it's been a deflationary trend. Very fast at the beginning, and then slowing more and more and more and more and more, and it's getting slower and slower and slower and slower. So this is the interesting thing to see if we're actually like how long we can keep deflating. At some point, we may start to inflate again, and that was our turnaround point in 2020, and that happened about a week into the eruption or so. So we're not quite a week in here, but we'll be curious to see what happens. And you know, that's really since how long pressure's been building under the summit is since that. After the first week of the eruption, since the middle of that last eruption. And here we are. So the whole past month tilt, we get a view of it here right now because it's still showing our long gradual increase with some deflation-inflation events that were small, but not as frequent. And then our big drop off here, and then our little signals that we're just pointing out right in there. Okay, so we're almost through the signals, but there's some interesting stuff still to cover here at the end, and then we'll make sure we cover Mick and Bruce. So looking at the length across the caldera, this is north to south, station in the north, station in the south. This is the length across the caldera, which essentially, this is going back, this is a past year. So what typically happens is they spread apart, kind of bulging upwards, it's kind of swelling from below, and as it's popped, the whole thing deflates back down and the edges come closer together. So you can see them essentially spreading apart, erupting, coming together. That's the first week, and then you can see that after we switch from the north vent to the west vent in the last eruption, that we've really been spreading and coming apart ever since then. Even the eruption, this is all still erupting all through here. We're still spreading that crater apart from buildup underneath it, which is why we're so soon talking about the next eruption. So scrolling over here, at the very far right end, you can see that we've had a similar drop, and we're still going, and you really have one data point per day, so it's really just coming through here. We only have three days data plotted on here already, but we can start to see that same kind of pattern coming down. And with this little wiggle beforehand was that intrusion we had that kind of preceded it to the south. And so that's something we'll look at as well, as a connection of that intrusion to the south and this here as we look at this last segment of data. I want to make sure that we scroll down here to the pool cone and note that even though it's still small scale, if anything, it's also contracting. But at this point, it's not as important. We're analyzing these small changes last week because we were at the point where it was really ready to pop, and maybe the small changes are more meaningful. Now that thing actually has popped, I don't think this small little, the trend is anything really that noteworthy. So that's the GPS distance measurement. But we'll look at the other GPS as well. But first I want to bring up the Sandhill tilt plot. The Sandhill tilt plot is the station that's south of the caldera, southwest. And it happens to have two components. One that points, this blue one, to the northeast towards Hawaiʻi from the station. And then it's got one that points to the southeast, which is a green line, towards the area of the intrusion. So the caldera is kind of like this, and Hawaiʻi kind of like that. So more or less, I'm just very, very roughly sketching it. So you see the blue line is following that pattern of what Hawaiʻi was showing, and Uikahuna, same kind of pattern. But interestingly, our intrusion area that looked like it had been deflating for a while is also showing that kind of deflation there, right? And so that's different from what we see. If I show you guys the tilt plots from some of the other stations, here's Uikahuna. There's our Sandhill showing a green going down. But if you look, for example, at Kīlauea, you don't see the other components going down. It's in a different direction, obviously, but right. But this is the component towards Hawaiʻi, and then the other one's not showing as much change. And even though it's faulty at summer camp, you see similar kind of pattern with the green and the blue lines there. Really, this is a unique thing to this area where the intrusion was. And so I don't know what the heck's going on over there, but I'd like to investigate a little further. So we can pop over here to our 2-year GPS plots and analyze a little bit the data. We only have a few data points coming in, and this is now 2-year plots, so it's squished even more. So here's our last year's eruption, and here's our signal right here on the right. And at Uikahuna, you can see similar pattern as the last eruption, right? It was getting pushed to the west, and then it popped back to the east. It was getting pushed to the west and popped back to the east. Right? Same thing with the intrusion, back to the east. And the north-south component, it was getting pushed to the north and popped back to the south. And likewise, it was getting pushed to the north and popped back to the south. So all as expected, was getting pushed upwards and lowered, was getting pushed upwards and lowered, all consistent there. Right? Byron's Ledge, you can see same pattern, back here, 2020, same in the north, same in the up, right? That's all consistent, right? We're going to go down here to the outlet and crater rim now, right? So we go to crater rim, and we can see in 2020, where's my, back here, 2020 is right in here. 2020, we dropped down, and here we dropped down again. In 2020, we moved to the north, and our intrusion moved us north, and here we are moving north again. Right? So there's that. And also to the east, intrusion moved us east, we're moving east again in crater rim. So that's doing more work that intrusion was trying to do kind of to a further effect, right? Now we come over here to the outlet vent, which is the closest station to that intrusion in that dike. And we can see here, we went up during 2020, up during intrusion, and then we were going back down. Now we're going back up again. So it's interesting to to consider whether this pattern is coming from Hawaiʻi, or is something happening with the dike as well, or is a combined effect of the dike and Hawaiʻi. And we're going to need the USGS geologist to really give us an answer like that. I'm just putting a question out there, and an observation that is interesting, because you see these similar kind of patterns here, right? See that in the up, we really haven't had a drop in a crater rim station like we had before in 2020. So that's curious as well. There's some more complex dynamics happening with that dike right in there. Right? So that's kind of the things happening on the East Rift. On the summit, and on the East Rift, we're going to look here, and there's no major jumps anywhere. We see a lot of variation. It's all very, very small scale. And you see a little bit of a drop. Pu'uo'o is not getting pushed to the east quite as far anymore. Kamomoa is not getting pushed to the east quite as far anymore, or to the north. So it really looks like maybe the rift zone might be showing a little adjustment. But once again, we'll wait for the USGS to give some input on that. You might consider whether rift zone is part of that summit reservoir, might also be adding some of the material that's flowing back towards the summit. Looking further east, you can see the jacuzzi station that's near Pu'uo'o is also doing that wiggling. But further over Jonica in the lower East Rift, you see no indication that anything has changed whatsoever. No effect at all. And that is the most reassuring thing to our lower East Rift Zone residents, right? So that is basically it. I won't do the south flank on that today. I want to just maybe we'll turn to Bruce and Mick's Vimeo here. Let's see, do I have a... So there's a view. Oh. Zoom too far in there. Mahalo, Mick and Bruce, and they fly with Paradise helicopters. You can see here, sponsored here in the top right. Tropical Visions.
Yeah, I know they were trying to get up there for a few days, but the weather was so poor that it was hard to get a view from 30,000 feet down.
Right. I would turn the sound on this down if I could figure out how. Oh, it looks like it's frozen for me. We'll just leave it at that. I don't have to play the whole video. We can share that with you guys a little further there. But you see there's some other views from a little further up, and with nice cameras you can see the really amazing light. You can see here lighting at the edge of this crater here. So that's the view from Mick, and I think we do have Bruce has got a whole photo gallery as well. We can maybe cover that next time or bring that up. And I just want to make sure we give one last refresh here on our active webcams. I think it's now dark, and just kind of do a scan here and see if anything's changed. There's our view from the S1, view from the B1, from the KW camera, and we'll scroll down past the other ones here. This is our view from the east angle wide camera, right? So you can see here that inner pit. You can see that whole down drop block edge here. You can see lights all the way over here. It might be Kilauea Overlook or the volcano. I'm not sure if that might be Kilauea Overlook. I'm sorry, Kilauea Iki Overlook. There we are right there. And just going down to our thermal, you can see, looks like there's a little levee forming there with a little overflow breaching it at the moment right over here to the south. So that is our, nice view from Mauna Loa Road as well. You can see cars at Wikahuna at the overlook and people over here on a trail as well, trying to get a better view down into the pit. So that is the views we have from today that I have lined up. Of course, just want to remind you guys that we have hawaiitracker.com on Facebook, where we have a lot more contributions of people posting their photographs, whether it's of the volcano or elsewhere on the island. So this is a great time to come visit and explore all the different aspects of Hawaii. And coming down here, I want to point out, of course, everyone is aware that today is a day that Facebook's in the news. And I don't want to get too much into the, why it happened or any of that. But the point of this is that, we have a backup for our local communities, especially if there is a chance, if there's a need to communicate emergency information, eruption information, we use hawaiitracker.com, right? And so this is a good chance for us to talk about that, about how it's crazy to think it will always be there for you all the time and always have your best interest in mind. So we appreciate it if you guys want to support us in that effort, to just go to our website at hawaiitracker.com and just navigate around. That's going to help us boost our statistics, get our views up. If you want to go a little bit further into it, you can sign up for a newsletter. You can get email updates. That way, if Facebook's on, you'll still get our emails if something's breaking news. You can become start a user account, and you can comment on our posts here, or you can post your own stuff as well, especially if you have information to share about the community or something happening there as well. And this is what allows us to essentially have sponsors that we can sell. And so you don't have to actually give us any money. Just come to our website and click around if you want. That helps a lot. Share it with people. And then you can see some more of this information as well. So Dane, I will turn it over to you to take over from there.
Yeah, definitely. For those that are new here, we do our normal presentation and updates on the volcanoes no matter what's happening on Thursdays, and we will be planning on bringing you another episode Thursday at 5 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time, going over any changes that happen on the volcano and kind of recompiling what takes place between now and then. If anything does take place that's outside the ordinary or is exceptionally interesting, we will probably go live or make a post just to highlight that. But yeah, our normal time is 5 p.m. on Thursdays and 5 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time. So if you're looking for, wondering what our schedule is, that's the main one to check us out on. Things like today, if there's activity and something to talk about, will come online. But so we changed the schedule up on the other days, but Thursdays, that's a lock.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. As we were talking earlier, Dan and I were talking, the amount of lava coming out, this may last as long as the last eruption. So we've learned we have to pace ourselves for the long term, right? We can't kind of keep up in the everyday thing all the time. And so we may, if we can't, we'll do twice a week, especially if it's interesting. And as changes come less frequently, then we might slow down some more too. But we'll wait and see how it goes, because we definitely like to talk about the things that are interesting, and if they're interesting things, then we'll talk about it more often as well. And of course, we do try to provide not just live videos, but short videos, and so we might put out a short video in between the live videos if something unique is going on instead. So make sure you're tuned in to all the different ways we might share data.
Definitely. I do have one question here from Tabitha, who asks, can you see the lava from the viewing areas? If not, when do you think we'll be able to see it easily?
Yes, you can see it from the viewing areas, and I'll loop back to my video that I started at the very, very beginning, right here. And this is a video I took from the public overlook, granted with a big zoom lens, this morning. But that's the view in the daytime. And if you haven't seen the view that I posted of lava at night, that is on our feeds as well. In fact, it may have as well shown on Hawaii News now, tonight already, by now, I'm not sure. But they have the permission to use it as well, and similar to this, except that one is the nighttime view, and this is a daytime view. So yes, if you're curious, it's not something I've been trying to post all over the internet. The national park put out a release about how to visit and where to see lava from in a national park, and they did not include a specific location, which I thought was interesting. And I think they must have their reasons for that. So it may be with trying to manage crowds or that kind of thing. I will certainly tell you, but I'm not going to necessarily post it online, as its own post by itself. So you might have to dig into the comments, or watch how long has it been here, an hour 25 minutes of video, and then I'll tell you that if you go to the Jagger Museum and walk back towards the Kīlauea overlook, that's the area where the best view is from at the moment on the north side.
Yep, and that gives you a leg up on everybody else that doesn't know the general area.
Yeah, when I was there this morning, there were as few as 5 people, including my group of 3. Really amazing for it to have a view like this you guys are seeing on a screen, and I'm wondering, where's the telescope and lines and the ranger telling everyone to keep their mask on and whatever is
Right.
I had imagined it to actually be. And there's very little traffic up there, and I think partly because they're not publishing the exact location. Of course, the benefit is the higher it comes up, it'll be visible more and more areas around the crater rim. And if we have those fountain bursts, then you might see it come up even from kind of the Ko'i side. We've had a couple reports of that, but hard to say if that was from public areas. And so, like I said before, I've talked to some of the rangers who are back behind the closed areas over there. So yeah,
Right.
there's a zoomed out view. All right, so yeah, I'll pause this, and we that's our only question. I did bring up the website, and so we can get it back over here.
Yeah.
There is the donation button on the website as well, right over here. So that is a way you can support us as well if you're so inclined and you want to keep us going. Right? Mahalo for your support. Do you have did we shout out our donors already?
Yeah. I think I got them all. There might have been one more. Let me just check. No, we got them all in the last little bit.
Yeah, and even the ones from Ryan.
Oh, yeah. Let's grab those. The Facebook ones. Sorry, I don't think I did do those. We did have support on hawaiitracker.com/support. That's where we take donations outside of YouTube.
Those guys. Yeah.
Irene H, Judy P, Linda H, and Brenda P, and we really appreciate that support as well as everybody else that has supported us previously and continue to show that support.
Yeah, mahalo. Thanks, Dan. Those are the ones. So did we get to most of the questions here?
Yeah, I believe so. The ones that I wrote down, and I answered a bunch of them in chat. Unless you have an estimate for the volume, that's the one that I saw. The
Okay.
volume of this eruption so far.
I can possibly figure that out here on the fly because I have a pre-calculated spreadsheet. So I just need to look on my spreadsheet here and see how far we've come up, right? So if we're up at 259, was it? 259.
The height, yeah.
Yeah. So my estimate.
The thing that's interesting to me is that drop down in the latest lake depth. Reading.
That's a funny thing. I wonder, like the drop down doesn't make sense if it's a natural cause. I wonder if they reset it.
That's what I'm wondering, or it's just weird. Like I don't know. It's weird speculation to think how it would be naturally caused, just all of a sudden, boom, down that many meters.
And the webcam time lapses don't show that. They don't show a drop in the lava lake, right? That's a key thing to note. It's not like the lava level dropped and we don't know where it's going. It's like we don't see it dropping at all.
Right. And it drops something like by whatever this graph is showing, 5 meters or so.
Yeah.
Which would be very significant. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just tell you, like, if it had been my job, which it wasn't, so I was totally out on a limb here and just guessing, right? But if my job was to repoint that thing, I'm going to point it to the near side of that big island now, to that, where that flow is, or I have to point it more to the west, in the southwest, closer to that west vent, that new west vent area, where maybe it'll stay open the longest. Might be where I point it. Another place I might point it. But in any case, I'm pointing it to somewhere different that I can maintain my line of sight. Even if the island's rising up, I can shoot to the side of it and try to get to the depth below that vent. Right. So it's really interesting to think about. The whole geometry is changing through time, right? Calculating their angles and all that. So it's fascinating to think about how they track that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So to answer your question, I'll bring my button here. This is a spreadsheet, but my calculations here, and this is based on a DEM and volume calculations from a DEM that existed, right? So I don't have a 259, I got a 262, which I had estimated to be the view from the north, right? So and that would be 19 million cubic meters. Now I think we're not quite to there, and we have that kind of perched edge and it's higher on one side or the other. So maybe give it 17 to 18 million cubic meters. That's my estimate right now. Best guess.
All right. Yeah, I think that's a good guess. I haven't seen any official numbers out, so
well, my last guess of 10 million was right on.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there you go.
I'm calling it a guess still, but I was right on.
Yeah.
It's a guess after I loaded the DM into GIS and I calculated the volume of the topography.
Bunch of work.
So it's not exactly a guess, but I'm gonna, I'll call it a guess.
Yeah. Well, right on. We appreciate everybody that came and joined us for this episode tonight. We will be back on Thursday is the plan with another update on Kilauea and go over the latest and greatest from the eruption.
Yeah, and we'll look for our text updates and short video updates in between now and then. We'll add whatever else there is to add and little clips and things. We'll keep the format fresh for those who like other ways to consume their information.
Yep, definitely. So yeah, that's hawaiitracker.com for anybody that's new. And until next time, I'm out. Back to you, Phil.
Mahalo, Dane. Mahalo all for our supporters, including the Puna Strong Grant County, Hawaii. And for hawaiitracker.com, he's Dane DuPont. I'm Philip Ong.